All right. So we are going to go over making a good offer and how to tie in motivation. So the offer call itself isn't about the number, right? It's about making the seller feel like we've heard them, we've understood, and we want to prime them to get ready to say yes. And the way to do that is to put them in an emotional state. So quick example, basically why motivation changes everything. So if you were buying green beans, you don't really care, right? It's low stakes. There's no urgency. It doesn't really matter. There's no emotional decision behind it. It comes down entirely to price, right? You see two green beans sitting there, you're going to go with the cheaper one. That's the only thing that matters. Now, if it's a life or death decision, it's an extreme outcome. There's massive emotional weight attached to it. So when someone's back is against the wall, price becomes secondary to getting rid of the pain, getting rid of the suffering, getting rid of the results of this life or death decision. So they just want help fixing the problem, and then money just doesn't become an issue anymore. So our goal is to move every seller from green beans to a heart transplant and tie that emotion directly back to the offer. So how do we do that? So first, just the offer call structure. Basically, we're going to set expectations, time, agenda, results. We're going to tell them exactly what the call is and ask if they have enough information to make a yes or no decision. Now, this is slightly different if we're doing a one-call close, and you'll see this in the script. The one-call close, we don't set expectations again, but more or less everything else is the same. So we're going to walk through the process, what it looks like, written offer, walkthrough, title company, closing. We want to make it simple, clear, safe before we mention anything about money, because as soon as you mention money, everything else goes out the window. What we want to do is we want to summarize their motivation. We want to recap everything they've told us in their words and with their emotions. So this ties all the way back to digging deep into motivation and understanding the impact using third-party stories. So everything comes together here. So this is the most important part. You want to make them feel heard. You want to make them feel like you understand the pain of selling, or what the joy would be if they were to sell and what they could do next. We also want to address the roadblocks and talk about that. So we want to talk about, hey, discomfort, what they need to figure out. We want to talk about influencers and who they need to talk to, or if they've already had that conversation. We want to do that now instead of after the offer. And next, you just present your offer. So you present the offer and you shut up and see what they say. So how do we summarize motivation? So basically, the formula is as follows. So one, we don't want to paraphrase, right? We don't want to say you were kind of talking about this, right? If they say a charged word, if they say they're exhausted of dealing with this, we want to tell them like, hey, you mentioned that you've just been completely exhausted dealing with this property, that the tenants, that the repairs, they've just been really draining you financially. Right? That's how we want to say. We want to use their words because that's what they told us they were feeling. We want to name that emotion and say what they're feeling out loud. They need to hear that reflected back and have them internalize that. Next, we want to connect it to life beyond the property. So this happens in the process call, which is why digging deep into motivation is so important during the process call. What does selling allow them to do? What's next for them? What does holding it cost them as well? And we want to play that back for them, right? We want to say like, hey, you mentioned that if you were to sell this, it would be a huge weight lifted off your shoulders. And the first thing you're going to do is you're finally going to take that vacation you've been waiting 18 years to take. We want to say that back to them as we recap the motivation before we get to the number. And then ideally, like we're making it feel inevitable, like, hey, like you've been thinking about this for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, whatever it may be. You've realized that it's time to sell the property. You don't want to deal with it anymore, so on and so forth. So here's an example of how to recap. And you could even go deeper than this, like this even feels like, be like, it's an inherited property, like, great. So I understand this was your childhood home, and even though you've had some amazing memories here, you mentioned your favorite dog is buried in the backyard still. You realize it's finally time to let it go. You told me your dad wouldn't have wanted it to just sit empty, so you really want to honor his memory, and of course, put a little money in your pocket as well, but mostly this will be a big step in your healing process. I'm grateful to be able to possibly help you bring this property back to life for a new family. And you even, I would say you even want to go deeper than this. So it's something that you'll get better at and you'll practice over time. And before you make offers, you'll have a full recap and motivation written down where you can practice that. And then through the notes, you can kind of just go back through and summarize their motivation. Now, this isn't something you just read off. You want to be able to get the emotion across of what they were feeling at that time. So this is supposed to be like an Oscar-worthy performance. This isn't just like, hey, I understand this was your childhood home. You've had some memories here. You mentioned your favorite dog's buried in the backyard still. You've realized it's time to let go. You want to really get that emotion across. Be like, hey, you mentioned that it's finally time to let go. You've been thinking about this for months now. And like you said, it's causing you trouble sleeping, it's giving you anxiety, and you wake up every day thinking like, what is this tenant going to do next? And we talked about how being able to sell this is going to just take off so much stress, or take off so much stress from your plate, and it's going to allow you to sleep well through the night for the first time in a year and a half. Now that comes across differently than just reading off a script. Like, you want it to be heartfelt, because at the end of the day, we are helping these people, and being able to recap their motivation is a great way to get them back into that emotional state. So what kills the offer before you give it? The number rarely kills the deals in and of itself. What happens before the number does? So one, we don't want to just jump straight to the number, right? We don't want to skip the motivation recap and go straight to the offer, because it feels rushed. It feels like they weren't heard. We haven't re-engaged them emotionally, so all they want to hear is price. And you'll come across people who are like, just give me the price. And you say, look, I'll get there. I just want to recap what I talked about with the team. We don't want a generic recap with no emotion. So you mentioned you wanted to sell. That's not a recap. You need to use their words, their feelings, their reason. It's not just a summary. If it sounds like a form that you're just reading off of, you're not doing it correctly. We want to, obviously cover any roadblocks before going into the offer. So if the spouse isn't looped in or discomfort hasn't been addressed, the offer will almost come back with like, oh, I need to think about it. You want to get ahead of that I need to think about it and solve for them first, so there's nothing else for them to think about. Another one is we never negotiate live on price. If they push back on the number, you got to go back to the underwriter. Let me see what they can do. Never negotiate in real time. Never guarantee anything either. Like, the whole framing of this is it's you and the seller on the same side of the table, and then it's the underwriters on the other side. So it's like, hey, I don't know what the team's going to say, but what if we try to do X? What if I was able to get them to come up just a little bit to Y? Is that something you can move forward with? And again, I don't want to promise you anything, right? That's how we want to approach it. And then the other thing we want to just reiterate over time is we want to remind them that we're making this easy for them. They're going to forget a lot of these things. So it's like, hey, I just want to remind you, like, we're covering 100% of the closing costs, so you don't have to pay anything there. There's no commissions involved whatsoever. We're going to cover 100% of the commissions. Repairs, you don't have to do any. We're not going to ask you to do a single thing to the property. And then lastly, cleaning. You don't have to clean the thing. You mentioned you want to leave some things behind. We'd be able to accommodate that. And then we want to say, like, the 30-day timeline, 45-day timeline, whatever it may be, we can also accommodate that. So every time we come back with the number, we want to reiterate these things. It really anchors the value of the offer before they hear the price. So here's the drill I want you to work on. You want to practice this motivation recap until it sounds personal and not scripted. The seller should feel like you actually listen to them, which you should. So one, I want you to write a recap, right, for the seller, using their words, using their emotions. You want to hit on the situation, the emotional toll, what life looks like once they're able to get this problem off their hands, once they're able to sell this property. And then you want to address the roadblocks as well. Next, I want you to practice delivering it out loud. You want to say the full recap out loud with the right tonality. You want to be warm. You want to be empathetic. You don't want to be robotic and you're just, hey, you mentioned that your dog died. You're looking to sell your house. This would mean a lot. Here's the offer, right? You need to change your pace. You need to change your tone, your voice. It slows down. It gets softer. What it would mean to you. That's what you need to practice on as well. So You do that, then you walk through what she's not paying, right? Hey, there's no repairs, there's no commissions. We're going to cover 100% of the closing costs. And then we'll also be able to move on your timeline. So it's everything that will allow you to get to Florida to be closer to your daughter. Lastly, want you to practice just doing this live. So working with a partner, running the full sequence of making an offer, presenting the offer, and make it feel like a real call. So that's it for making a good offer. If you have questions, let me know.